The wind heaves across the steppes, a hollow breath drawn from the lungs of the earth itself. It whispers through the tall grass, bending each blade as though in reverence or warning. The sky burns violet at the edges, the last light dissolving behind distant ridges where shadowed riders might once have passed. In the half-light, a single figure kneels beside a dying fire. Sparks lift and vanish into the vastness. Temüjin's fingers move through ash and bone, tracing remnants of what was. A feast now gone cold, a family long scattered. Behind him, the leather walls of his mother's gur quiver in the restless wind. The smell of horses and boiled mutton clings to the air. Somewhere far off, a stallion's whinny echoes, not wild, but mourning. Temüjin's breath catches the cold, his chest rising and falling with a rhythm older than his years. The boy's face, framed by dark strands of tangled hair, gleams in the fire's last breath. Neither child nor man, but something in between. His eyes, dark and molten, lift toward the sky, where the first stars tremble awake. They mirror the promise of what is to come, and the cost that promise will demand. For here, in the belly of solitude, the seed of empire stirs, a boy's hunger sharpening into purpose. He remembers the river, swollen and merciless, when his mother, Hoelen, dragged him through the current after their camp had fallen. He remembers her silence more than her words, the way her jaw clenched when she spoke of his father's poisoning, of their clan's betrayal, of brothers turned to thieves under the same moon. Loyalty, she said, was a blade. Wielded with honor, it could bind. Wielded in deceit, it could wound without healing. That night, in the shattered wreckage of his childhood, Temüjin learned the steppe's first law, that nothing survives unclaimed. Food, kin, horse, even the breath in one's chest, all must be seized, held, or defended. And so he began to watch the wolves. They came in pairs, lean and patient, circling the herds his family guarded through frost and famine. He studied how they waited, how they tested, how they struck. The wolves killed not in rage, but in rhythm. The same rhythm he would one day bring to men and kingdoms. When hunger came, he scavenged what little they had, marrow from the bones of slaughtered sheep, berries crushed in frost, water drawn from the thin ice of riverbeds. His mother's hands, raw from grinding seed, trembled as she fed her children. Yet she never bowed. To her, the heavens were not gods to be worshipped, but watchers to be challenged. The eternal blue sky sees all, she told him, her voice a whisper against the wind. At night, Temüjin would lie awake beneath the firs, listening. He heard the groan of frozen ground, the creak of distant saddles, the moan of wolves echoing across the plain. The steppe was not silence, it was a song of survival. And within that song, he began to hear his own heartbeat keeping time. Years pass as wind over grass, unseen yet carving paths. He grows taller, his voice deepens, his eyes darken. The tribes that once called themselves brothers now scatter into warring bands. Temüjin, Jadaron, Merkit, each nursing grudges like dying embers. The boy becomes their shadow, watching from the ridges, learning the shape of power. When he finds the horse thief, a boy only slightly older than himself, Temüjin does not strike in rage. He waits until the wind shifts, until the dust blinds his foe. Then he takes the boy's throat in his hand and speaks softly, almost kindly. "You took what feeds my blood. Now I take what feeds yours." The boy's body falls into the grass, silent. Temüjin does not look away. He buries him beneath stones, murmuring the prayer he half remembers, not for mercy, but for strength. Each act of survival etches something new into him, a scar, a vow, a silence. He begins to believe that fate is not given, but made, beaten into shape like iron over flame. One evening, as storms gather across the horizon, Temüjin rides beyond the camp. The air hums with static. The clouds bruise purple and black. He dismounts and stands upon a rise overlooking the endless steppe, a sea of shadows rippling beneath thunder. Lightning splits the sky. For a heartbeat, he feels the vastness of all that lies ahead. The warring tribes, the rivers that will run red, the cities whose walls will crumble beneath his name. He kneels again, as he did by that dying fire. The rain begins, cold, hard, cleansing. He presses his hand to the mud, feels the earth's pulse beneath his palm. The wind howls like the voice of an old god, yet it does not frighten him. It calls. He remembers his mother's words. "The eternal sky spares no one." He whispers back into the storm. "Then let it test me." A raven circles above, its cry slicing through the thunder, sharp, defiant. Its wings catch the lightning, black and silver. For an instant, Temüjin sees himself reflected in its flight, solitary, relentless, destined to cut through the storm, not be swallowed by it. The fire in his chest, once small and fragile, now burns steady. He will return to his people, not as a starving boy, but as a leader born of exile and ice. The steppe has tested him, tempered him, named him. The storm breaks fully, and he stands unflinching beneath it. Around him, the grass bends low, bowing to the coming of something vast. He mounts his horse, its mane slick with rain, and turns toward the darkness. Lightning flashes again, and in that flash, for those who would one day remember, it seemed as if the steppe itself had crowned him. He rides back toward the smoldering horizon, where kinship has fractured and war waits with open hands. Behind him, the raven follows, its wings a shadow against the storm. Ahead lies the first reckoning, with his father's betrayers, with the men who once called themselves his brothers. And so the boy rides into destiny's open wound, into the echo of drums not yet beaten, into the silence before empire. The wind howls after him, carrying the taste of rain, of ash, of blood yet spilled. And in that haunting breath, the world begins to turn toward its conqueror. The steppe watches, the heavens wait, and the tale moves closer to thunder. A single candle burns at the heart of the hall, its flame a trembling soul in the breath of winter. Smoke curls upward, tracing the shape of wolves carved into the wooden pillars, their eyes glinting with the half-life of firelight. The beams above groan softly in the wind, and the scent of pine seeps in through the open door, mingling with the musk of hides and the faint tang of boiled marrow. Shadows lean close upon the faces of the gathered elders, their murmurs weaving like threads through the dim, smoky air. Temüjin stands at the edge of the light, his hands resting on the rough grain of the table. Beneath his palms he can feel every cut of the wood, old, scarred, and stubborn, like the men who sit before him. Their words are quiet but heavy, each one shaped with care, their meanings folded within meanings. The talk is of lineage, of blood, of alliances spun through marriage, of the rope that binds clans together or strangles them in time. A cup passes from hand to hand, bronze clinking softly against the wood. Laughter flickers and dies as quickly as the candle's flame. A pot of broth steams in the corner, its scent earthy, salted, reminding Temüjin of childhood, of hunger endured beside his mother, of winters when broth was prayer. Yet now, standing among men who speak of peace, he feels only unease. Across the hall, one elder's voice rises, his breath fogging in the cold air. The world is not won by swords alone, he says. We need the bonds that make us kin. His words hang like frost, brittle and breakable. Temüjin lowers his gaze, his fingers tightening on the table's edge. Kin. A word too easily spoken, too easily betrayed. He thinks of Borte, her face, her voice, the promise made under the watch of the eternal blue sky. That promise was not crafted by elders, nor sealed by cattle or coin. It was sealed by hunger, by youth, by faith in something that could not be bought. He hears her laughter in memory, light and fierce like a bird taking flight, and feels the ache of distance in his chest. She is not here to defend herself, nor he her. Her fate, like his, is being weighed in the mouths of old men. Their talk continues, bride wealth, dowry, obligations. Words that sound like peace, but smell of fear. Behind the ritual courtesies, he senses the true current, the shifting sands of loyalty, the quiet calculations of power. To them, he is still the son of Yasuge, the orphan who survived the wolves, but not yet their politics. The candle flickers again, casting shadows that climb the walls like spirits. The carved wolves seem to move in the uncertain light, their wooden jaws opening as if to whisper warnings. Temüjin looks around the hall, at the hunched backs, the hands clutching cups, the eyes that refuse to meet his. He feels the weight of centuries pressing down, the suffocating grip of custom that binds men to timidity. He remembers another kind of fire, the glow of torches against a winter sky, the screams of raiders tearing through camps, the smell of blood and smoke. Peace, he thinks, is the lie men tell themselves before war returns to claim them. A sparrow flutters into the hall, a small, frantic thing, its wings beating against the smoke. It lands upon the lintel, blinking into the half-light, then vanishes again through the open door. The silence that follows is heavy, unnatural, like the hush before a storm. Every man looks to the door for a heartbeat too long, as though they too have seen an omen pass. Temüjin steps back from the table. The murmur of voices continues behind him, but he no longer hears it. The door yawns open, and he walks into the night. Outside, the air is cold and clean. The moon hides behind a veil of cloud, and the plain stretches out before him, endless, unbroken, dusted in frost. The stars above flicker faintly, fragile lights across a black sea. He stands still, listening. The wind moves through the grass, whispering secrets older than kings. Somewhere beyond the horizon, a wolf howls, long, low, and lonely. Temüjin closes his eyes. He feels the echo of that howl in his blood, the same restless call that has haunted him since boyhood. He knows that what the elders decide inside that hall, these marriages, these treaties, these borrowed loyalties, will crumble like ice underfoot. Peace will not hold. It is a garment sewn over a wound that still bleeds beneath. He breathes in the cold until it burns his lungs. Somewhere out there, Borte waits, her village lit by dim torches, her fate bound to his. And in the fragile quiet of this night, he feels a shift within himself. Something loosens, something resolves. He is done waiting for others to shape the world. He looks out across the steppe, his world, his inheritance, his prison. He imagines it aflame with the fires of conquest and renewal, the tribes no longer scattered but one, forged by purpose and pain. He imagines a storm of hooves, a tide of banners rising under a single name, his. The wind lashes his cloak, snapping it like a flag. He whispers into the dark, "The sky is wide, but my will is wider." His voice is quiet, but the earth seems to answer. A low tremor beneath his feet, the sigh of the grass bending in waves. He turns back toward the hall, where the candle still burns behind wooden walls, where men speak of safety and compromise. Let them. He will not live in their peace. Above him, the clouds begin to part. A sliver of moonlight touches the plain, silvering the frost, catching the edge of his cheekbone, the line of his jaw. His eyes glint, not with reflection, but with purpose. Somewhere beyond the horizon, storms are forming, unseen yet unstoppable. Temüjin mounts his horse, its breath steaming in the night. The animal shifts beneath him, sensing the unease, the readiness. He rides a short distance to the crest of a hill and stops. From here, the world looks endless, silent, waiting. He gazes toward the east, toward the land of the Merkits, toward the rivers where betrayal began. His hands tighten on the reins. He knows that before peace can be reborn, it must first be broken. The wind gathers strength, rising like the breath of something ancient awakening. The candle inside the hall flutters and dies. And beneath the moon's pale watch, Temüjin rides back into the dark, toward vengeance, toward destiny, toward the coming fire. The steppe does not sleep. It watches, it remembers, and the night, once still, begins to move. The first snow falls without sound, a quiet shroud descending upon the felt tents, the tethered horses, the black river of night. It settles like ash upon the camp, soft and merciless, each flake a whisper of winter's dominion. The steppe, once a sea of wind and dust, now lies still beneath a pale, endless sky. No voices, no laughter, only the slow exhale of beasts and the crunch of boots pressing into the frozen earth. Temüjin walks alone through the frost-laden hush, his cloak stiff with ice, the breath from his lips vanishing as quickly as it forms. The world seems to recoil from warmth. Lanterns glow faintly through the snow, halos of amber trembling in the cold, their light clinging to the sides of yurts like fragile memories refusing to die. Somewhere, the scent of boiled marmot meat drifts from a hearth, a reminder of the living, of hunger kept at bay by fire and faith. But beneath it all lingers something heavier, loss and the weight of what cannot be reclaimed. He passes by the shadows of his kin, hunched against the wind, faces wrapped in fur, eyes empty of dream. These are not the fierce sons of the steppe who once thundered across the plains. They are survivors, ghosts of a tribe undone. The Temüjin took their herds, the Tatars took their peace, and the winter will take whatever remains. He stops before the yurt of his mother. The leather flaps creak as the wind pulls at them, but inside the air is warm with smoke and whispered prayer. Hoelun kneels by a small altar of stone and herbs, her face half lit by the trembling flame. The scent of juniper fills the space, sharp and ancient. Her lips move in rhythm with the flicker of light, chanting the names of their ancestors, summoning memory to stand guard against despair. Temüjin watches her silently, his figure framed by the dim glow. For a moment he is a child again, the boy who clung to her side when their clan abandoned them, when they foraged through frozen reeds for fish bones and scraps. He remembers the bite of wind, the ache of hunger that felt like fire, the long nights when she sang to drown the cries of his brothers. Her voice now trembles with the same quiet defiance. "We are not lost," she murmurs. "We are never lost so long as the sky sees." He kneels beside her. The warmth of the fire licks at his frozen fingers. She turns to him, her eyes deep as the winter night. In her hands a small bundle, a scrap of leather worn smooth by time, bound with a single strand of horsehair. She presses it into his palm. "Your father carried this when he rode to war," she says softly. "It bears the scent of our home, before the fire, before the betrayal." Temüjin closes his fist around it. The leather is warm, as if it remembers the hand that once held it. His throat tightens. "Will the sky still see us?" he asks, his voice barely above a breath. Hoelun studies him. The boy grown tall, the man still half-made. Her answer comes not in words, but in the press of her hand against his cheek. Her skin is rough, lined with labor, but her touch is steady. The sky forgets no name, she whispers, but it waits for those who call to it. Outside, a wolf howls, a long, mournful cry that rolls across the plains like grief given sound. Hoelen looks toward the sound, and her gaze lingers there. Even the wolves remember their blood, she says. Do not forget yours. Temüjin stands. The yort's warmth seems too soft, too human. He steps into the open air again, and the cold rushes to meet him, sharp and clean as a blade. Snow swirls around his boots, gathering in the folds of his cloak. The fire behind him crackles once and fades to a glow. The steppe stretches before him, vast, pale, and merciless. It is not empty, it is waiting. Waiting for a man to rise who will not beg the wind for mercy. He turns his gaze to the horizon, where the last color of dusk drains away. The world seems suspended in silence. In that silence, memory stirs. The screams of raided camps, the torches rising like a tide, the betrayal of clans who once swore brotherhood beneath the same sky. He feels the sting of those nights as though they are carved upon his skin. Somewhere, far to the west, his enemies sit by their own fires, warm and laughing, the spoils of his people in their hands. They believe him broken, another orphan swallowed by the snow. But they do not understand that the cold is his kin now, the hunger his teacher, the silence his forge. He looks down at the scrap of leather in his hand. It is no longer just a relic. It is a promise, a tether to all that was lost and all that must be restored. The wind rises, carrying with it the faint smell of pine and distant smoke. Above him, clouds drift apart, and from behind them a single star pierces through, small but burning steadfast against the void. He lifts his head to it. There is no warmth in that light, no comfort. Yet it endures, and so will he. He breathes out, his breath crystallizing in the air, a fleeting ghost that vanishes into the night. I will return what was stolen, he murmurs. I will make the sky remember my name. The wind answers with a low moan that ripples through the frozen grass, as if the earth itself acknowledges the vow. Temüjin pulls his cloak tighter and begins to walk. Each step sinks into snow, each exhale a small defiance against the void. Behind him, the camp flickers faintly, gold against white, the last remnant of an old world clinging to life. Ahead, the steppe stretches on into nothingness, infinite and unsympathetic. But in that emptiness lies the promise of conquest, the dream of unity, the echo of thunder not yet born. As he walks, the snow deepens, the stars sharpen, and the horizon fades into a white haze, a world erased, awaiting its new script. The cold gnaws at his face, his hands, his heart. But within him burns something colder still, resolve. The first star glimmers above, fragile yet unyielding, and Temüjin moves beneath it. his shadow long and solitary against the snow. The world is silent now, silent and waiting for the storm to find its voice. The storm breaks without mercy. Thunder cracks like the splitting of the sky itself, and rain falls in iron sheets, drumming on canvas, on earth, on bone. The camp lies swallowed in darkness, tents bending beneath the wind, fires smothered to dull embers, the voices of men reduced to whispers beneath the roar of the heavens. The air tastes of smoke and metal. Horses cry out from their tethers, their manes whipped wild, their eyes rolling white in fear. Temüjin sits alone on a low wooden stool, its carving slick with rain, his silhouette carved by lightning. Before him, the plain is a living storm, rivers breaking their banks, thunder crawling across the horizon. The smell of wet earth rises like memory, sharp and honest, the scent of his childhood after loss. He watches the torrent as though it were a reflection of his own heart, chaotic, relentless, without pity. Each drop that strikes his face feels like a question he has already answered. What will you endure to rise? He closes his eyes, and the thunder becomes the sound of hooves, his father's riders returning from war. He sees again that final day. Genghis Khan, poisoned by treachery, his breath shallow, the light fading from eyes that had once seen destiny across 1,000 miles of grass. The sky was gray then, too. The wind mourned through the camp like a widow's cry. When his father's horse came back riderless, the steppe itself seemed to bow in silence. The storm outside is only a mirror. For Temüjin, every storm has sounded the same since that day, not as noise, but as remembrance. His brother rode off soon after, chasing pride into exile. His family scattered like frightened birds. And Temüjin, left with a starving mother, a promise to a girl named Borte, and a heart already marked by grief, learned that survival is not mercy, but defiance. He can still taste the winters that followed, broth boiled from bone and despair, the musk of dying embers, the ache of hunger gnawing at the ribs like a creature trapped within. Yet it was in that famine that he began to see what others could not. Power was not in blood or birth. It was in the gathering of the broken, in the binding of those abandoned by fortune. He remembers each man he won with nothing but his word. A thief offered justice. A herdsman promised revenge. A slave granted freedom by the strength of his bow. They came not for riches, but for belonging. They came because he gave them something colder and harder than hope: purpose. Outside, the storm grows wild. The tent walls pulse with the wind, their ropes strained like the sinews of beasts. Temüjin rises slowly, his shadow stretching long against the flickering lamplight. His eyes gleam like embers refusing to die. He steps toward the open flap. The rain strikes his face with the sting of small stones, soaking his cloak until it clings to him like a second skin. Mud grips at his boots, trying to pull him down.
but he moves forward into the heart of the tempest. The plain is alive with chaos. Lightning forks across the horizon, turning every drop of rain into silver fire. For a moment, the world is revealed in its rawest truth. No kings, no borders, only the eternal contest between the strong and the devoured.
Temüjin lifts his head. The wind tears through his hair. The water streams down his face. He spreads his arms as though to embrace the storm, to challenge it. In the crash of thunder, he hears his father's voice, not as comfort, but as command. Do not wait for the sky to grant you favor. Take it. His heart pounds with that rhythm, thunder, breath, resolve. He feels the pulse of the earth beneath his boots, the steppe trembling with its ancient hidden power. Each heartbeat becomes a drum of war, each gust of wind a whisper of armies yet unborn. He can see it now, not in vision, but in certainty. Camps stretching to the horizon, banners snapping in the wind, thousands of hooves shaking the ground like storm clouds made flesh. He sees cities burning beneath the same lightning that now crowns the sky. He sees fear in the eyes of men who once mocked his name. He raises his voice, and though the rain drowns all sound, the storm seems to hear him. Let the sky test me, he whispers. Let it break me if it must. I will rise from its ruin. The lightning answers, a great white flash that splits the heavens, casting his figure in brief, terrible brilliance. For that instant he stands not as a man, but as the outline of what he will become. The storm's heir, the earth's instrument, the shadow that will one day darken the world. The rain lashes harder, hissing on leather and steel. Behind him, the camp shivers, men pulling cloaks tight, muttering prayers, glancing toward the figure in the storm. Some think him mad, others chosen. None can look away. Temüjin closes his eyes and lets the storm consume him. The water runs through his hair, down his arms, into his clenched fists. It is not cold anymore. It is fire disguised as rain. The thunder rolls again, deeper now, more distant, as though the sky itself bows in acknowledgement. And in that moment, something within him shifts. The boy who once begged the wind for mercy is gone. In his place stands the man who will command it. He lowers his arms, his breath steady. Around him, the storm begins to soften, its rage turning to rain, its thunder to a low murmur. The plain glistens in the faint light of dawn creeping through the clouds. Temüjin looks to the horizon, toward the east, where the sun will soon rise. In that direction lies vengeance. In that direction, empire. The world, soaked and trembling, waits to be claimed. He turns back toward his camp, where the first fires flicker weakly to life. Men stirring under soaked hides, faces pale in the gray light. They look at him now, not as a chieftain, but as something greater, something inevitable. The rain still falls, but softer, almost reverent. Steam rises from the earth as warmth returns. The smell of wet grass, iron, and smoke fills the air, the scent of rebirth. Temüjin walks among his men, water dripping from his cloak, his footsteps heavy but certain. The storm behind him fades into memory, but its mark remains in his gaze, calm, cold, and unyielding. He does not speak. He does not need to. The men see it in his face, the resolve of one who has been tempered by the heavens themselves. And as the clouds begin to part, a single beam of pale light pierces through, striking the ground where he stands. The steppe exhales, the rivers swell, and far to the east, the first dawn of conquest begins to stir. The storm has passed, but its echo walks the earth in the shape of a man who will soon be called Khan. The morning begins in silence, a silver hush laid upon the world. Mist drifts low over the valley, soft as breath, curling around reeds that whisper in the damp air. The river moves slow and deep beneath, its surface trembling with the reflection of a half-risen sun. Each ripple carries fragments of far-away life, petals from unseen orchards, drifting downstream like memories refusing to die. Somewhere beyond the haze, a forge sings its slow metallic rhythm, the measured clang of hammer on iron, a sound that feels older than language. It echoes faintly across the valley, merging with the faint murmur of men stirring, of horses stamping at the tether, of porridge simmering in cracked clay pots. Smoke rises in pale ribbons from the campfires, curling into the mist like prayers to the blue sky above. Temüjin walks alone through the waking hush. His cloak is heavy with dew, the leather darkened and slick. Beneath his boots, the planks of a narrow wooden bridge creak under the weight of his steps. Below, the river churns, cold, swollen, alive. He pauses at its center, eyes following the current as it carries those drifting petals toward the unseen horizon. In his hand, he holds an old iron ring, rough, rusted, and cold enough to burn the skin. Its surface is scarred, its circle imperfect. It once belonged to a rival chieftain, a man who stood proud before he knelt, who swore loyalty before he was buried in the earth. Temüjin took it not as plunder, but as reminder. Tribute, yes, but also a mark of the unending bargain between victory and vengeance. The metal presses into his palm, raising gooseflesh along his arm. He closes his fingers around it, feeling its weight, its history, its warning. He remembers the first ring he ever held. Not this one, but another, smaller, duller. He was a boy then, barely strong enough to draw a bow. He had ridden beside older warriors, their armor stitched with rawhide, their laughter coarse with hunger. He learned the rhythm of conquest from the saddle, the sway of stirrup, the bite of wind on his face, the scream of a man falling from his horse. He learned how blood stains leather, how the smell of smoke never truly leaves a man's hair. That first ring had come from a nameless raid, a village burned, its chief brought forward in chains. Temüjin had watched his elders dictate justice in the open air, their words carried by the wind, their faces stern beneath the endless sky. A broken axe was laid at the man's feet.
a symbol of defeat. A bowl of milk was poured onto the ground, a farewell to the spirits. The condemned bowed, and when the blade fell, Temüjin had not looked away. That night, as he sat beneath the tent flaps, he drank the sour tang of fermented mare's milk. He remembered his father's voice, long gone, and whispered his first prayer to Tengri, the eternal blue sky, asking not for peace, but for endurance. He remembers, too, the touch of his mother's fingers years later, when he limped back from exile, his leg wounded, his spirit hollow. Her hand had been soft, her words few, but in her silence he understood what the sky demanded, not faith, but the will to rise again. The river swells beneath him now, its roar rising like the voice of the past.
A bell tolls in the distance, once. Low, sonorous, carrying across the water like the heartbeat of some vast, unseen creature. Temüjin looks up, startled for a breath. The sound does not belong to the steppe. Bells belong to cities, to walls, to settled men who believe the earth can be owned. Yet here it is, a hollow tone rolling through mist and memory. The ring in his hand seems to hum with that vibration, its chill deepening. He looks across the bridge. On the far bank, through the veil of mist, a figure stands, motionless, indistinct. Only the outline can be seen, tall, cloaked, face hidden in shadow. The air between them is thick, heavy, charged with something unspoken. Temüjin stops walking. The planks creak under his boots. Rainwater beads on his brow, though the sky is clear. Another toll. The bell echoes again, longer, deeper, and the river seems to pause in its flow. The figure does not move. Temüjin's breath clouds the air. In the quiet between tolls, the world feels suspended, a single thread pulled taut between past and future. He feels the pulse of his blood, the ache of every scar beneath his armor. His fingers tighten around the iron ring until his knuckles whiten. He knows this moment. He has lived it in different forms, in every oath sworn, every battle begun, every silence before the storm. The crossing is never merely a path across water. It is the threshold between who he was and who he must become. The bell tolls a third time. The sound rolls through the mist like thunder softened by distance. Temüjin steps forward. Once, twice. Each footfall heavy, deliberate, echoing the rhythm of fate. As he nears the far side, the mist begins to thin. The figure remains, but no face reveals itself. Only a shadow, dissolving slowly into light. For a heartbeat, Temüjin wonders if it was ever truly there, or if it was the shape of doubt, the ghost of his younger self, watching from the edge of what must be left behind. He exhales, and the mist seems to breathe with him. When he reaches the end of the bridge, the bell falls silent. The only sound now is the river, endless and indifferent, carrying petals and ash alike toward the horizon. Temüjin looks down once more at the ring.
Water drips from his fingers onto the wood below, each drop catching the pale light like small shards of iron. He slips the ring into a leather pouch at his belt, not to forget, but to remember differently. Behind him, the bridge sways with the wind, groaning as though tired from bearing too much history. Ahead, the land opens, wide and waiting. The mist is beginning to lift, revealing slopes of green, and beyond them the faint glimmer of distant smoke. Another camp, another gathering of men who do not yet know whose banner they will soon serve. He stands for a moment, still and silent. Then, without a word, he steps off the bridge. The ground beneath him feels firmer, colder, the soil of a world about to change. The faint clang of the forge still echoes behind him, but now it sounds like something else entirely. The shaping of destiny, the birth of a name. Temüjin walks on. The wind catches his cloak, lifting it slightly, carrying the scent of river mist and smoldering wood. In his chest, something begins to stir. Not triumph, not yet, but clarity.
He does not look back. The river murmurs behind him, endless, eternal. The mist thins, and the sun rises, cutting through the gray like the edge of a blade. And somewhere beyond that light, unseen but certain, waits the next reckoning. The crossing is over. The journey beyond has begun. The dawn breaks not in color, but in dust. A column of it rises, pale and golden, rolling like smoke across the endless steppe. Hooves drum upon the hard earth, steady, rhythmic, eternal. From the east, where the light still hesitates, a procession of riders cuts through the chill wind. Their breaths mist the air. Their horses' flanks gleam with sweat. The world is still waking, and the only music is that of leather creaking, bits clinking, and the soft thud of hooves upon frozen soil. At the front rides Temüjin. His cloak lashes in the wind, worn and dust-stained, its hem whispering against the sides of his mount. His face, lean and pale beneath the morning glare, carries the stillness of one who has learned to wait through storms. Behind him stretch his people, warriors, wives, children, beasts of burden, a world on the move, bound not by walls or flag, but by hunger and hope. The smell of horse sweat mingles with the iron tang of leather and grit. The air is raw, each breath biting the lungs. Dew spatters against hides and mane. Reins glisten like wet snakes. They ride in silence, save for the low grunts of beasts and the faint chime of harness rings. Ahead, the horizon splits open, a cluster of yurts, their chimneys smoking faintly, threads of gray twisting into the morning haze. Temüjin narrows his eyes. That settlement, small, unassuming, wrapped in frost, is more than a camp. It is the weight of centuries of division. Each yurt a clan, each clan a promise, a wound, a debt.
He rides slower now, and as he does, his thoughts drift into the fog of memory. He sees faces, men he must call brother, though once they hunted his kin. Children born of alliances sealed in fear. The steppe remembers every betrayal. Some are written in scars, others in graves. He thinks of his father's death, poisoned by those who had once feasted at his fire. He thinks of his brother, cast into exile, his name a ghost in the wind. He thinks of the hunger that followed, of the nights when the wolves' howls drew closer than sleep, when he and his mother scoured the plains for marrow bones and frozen roots. He learned then that loyalty was not born of blood, but of necessity. The trust was a brittle cord, spun thin by need. Now, as his horse snorts steam into the cold air, Temüjin feels the old ache stir again. He touches the bow at his side, its polished horn smooth beneath his glove, and the quiver of arrows at his back, fletched with eagle feather and sinew bound. His hands know their purpose, as a priest knows prayer. They are the only language that endures when words fail. The yurts grow larger with each step. Smoke thickens, carrying the scent of burning dung and boiled millet. A dog barks. A child's voice calls out, distant and small, before being hushed. Then a tug.
He looks down. A girl stands beside his horse, eyes dark and unblinking. Her small hands clutch a wooden bowl of salted milk. Steam rises from it, curling into the chill. It is Borte's sister, a face of innocence in a world of bartered loyalties. She says nothing, only offers the bowl upward. Temüjin dismounts, boots striking the cold mud. He takes it. The warmth seeps through his gloves, spreading through his fingers, softening something within. For a moment the wind falls silent. He drinks, the taste of salt and smoke sharp upon his tongue. When he lowers the bowl, she is gone, swallowed back into the waking camp. He exhales, and his breath becomes a prayer no one hears. At the edge of the camp stands a low wooden gate, crude but guarded. The sentries step forward, two men wrapped in furs, faces wind-chapped and wary. Their hands rest on the hafts of their axes. "Tokens," one demands. His voice is hard, but there is something beneath it. Fatigue, perhaps, or fear. Proof of oath, no one enters without it. Temüjin says nothing for a moment. Behind him, his men shift in their saddles. Leather creaks. A few horses snort. The tension thickens like the gathering of a storm. He steps forward. The mud clings to his boots, sucking at every step. His voice, when it comes, is low, measured, calm, the way rivers sound before flood. "I come with words," he says, "not war." But the sentries hesitate. They have heard too many such words from too many mouths. One spits to the side. "Words are wind. Bring your mark or bring your hostages." The riders behind Temüjin stir, hands tightening on reins, eyes flicker to bows, to blades. The air feels sharp, electric, waiting. Temüjin stands still. The wind tugs at his hair, whipping loose strands across his face. His eyes, dark, unyielding, lock upon the sentries.
Then, without haste, he draws from his cloak a carved wooden tablet. It bears the symbol of his lineage, burned deep into the grain. The mark of his blood, of those who were once hunted, now returning to stand before the gates of men who had forgotten their name. He holds it out, not as supplication, but as declaration. The sentries look at one another. The elder of the two steps closer, eyes scanning the mark. The wood is rough, old, yet the burn is fresh. There is power in its simplicity, and something ancient in the man who carries it. Behind them, the sky begins to shift. The dawn has grown sharper. The sun's rim glows red above the plain. A gust sweeps through the camp, lifting ash from the fires, scattering it into the air. Temüjin raises his head, and in that instant his gaze lifts beyond the gate, beyond the men, beyond the smoke. High above, a hawk circles. Its wings flash bronze in the new light, cutting across the pale sky. It moves in widening spirals, searching, patient. He watches as it stoops, sudden, swift, precise. A blur of motion. The world seems to pause as its shadow sweeps over him, over the gate, over the men caught between fear and respect. He smiles, not with triumph, but with recognition. The sentries step aside. The gate creaks open. Temüjin passes through. Behind him, his riders follow, their horses' hooves sinking into the damp earth, the dust settling into quiet.
In that crossing, that single act of entry, lies the weight of countless histories: submission, defiance, rebirth. Within those yurts ahead are men he must persuade, clans he must bind, feuds he must bury or burn. He walks now among the smoke of cooking fires, the murmur of guarded voices, the eyes of those who remember his father's death and wonder if they look upon its echo. The hawk cries once above, its voice long and piercing. It fades into the wind. Temüjin pauses at the threshold of the largest yurt, the council's tent, its flaps stirring like lungs breathing in the cold air. He places his hand upon the felt door, feels the warmth within, the pulse of expectation. For an instant he hesitates, the way a man might before stepping into his own legend. Then he enters. The flap falls closed behind him. Outside, the hawk circles once more, then vanishes into the widening sky. The dust settles. The plain holds its breath. And somewhere far to the west, where the grass meets the shadow of mountains, the first embers of empire begin to stir. The hall breathes like a beast asleep. Stone ribs arch overhead, sweating with the breath of 1,000 nights. Torchlight flutters, struggling against the slow exhale of cold air that seeps from the cracks in the mortar. Beneath that dim amber light, faces emerge, rough, worn, carved by years of wind and war. The scent is iron and leather, spiced faintly with decay. Captives kneel in the center, a broken circle of lives caught between worlds. Ropes cut into wrists, eyes shine with the sheen of salt and fear. A Mongol guard shifts his weight, the metal of his lamellar armor whispers against itself. From the edges of the chamber, murmurs rise. Persian, Uyghur, Turkic, a storm of tongues barely bridled by authority. Translators repeat phrases like fragile bridges over deep rivers, their voices thin, trembling under the strain of meaning. Temüjin stands in shadow. His hand rests upon the pommel of his dagger, but his gaze is not upon the captives, it is upon the torches. Watching how the flame moves, how it bows and survives. The hall is filled with men who call themselves chieftains, each with their own measure of pride, each with their own definition of justice. But the air tonight belongs to him, to his silence. He remembers another silence, one not made of stone and authority, but of hunger. A silence of wind creeping over a steppe where his family once hid among the reeds. The echo of his mother's voice murmuring prayers to Tengri when all hope was stripped from them. That boy, starving, forgotten, left to the wolves, that boy still lives inside him, pacing like a shadow at the edge of his thoughts. The first captive speaks. His voice is rough, the words foreign but familiar in their rhythm of fear. He pleads in Persian, his hands bound but trembling as though to grasp at mercy. A translator kneels beside him, repeating his words. I did not betray, I only obeyed. The phrase hangs in the air like smoke, shapeless, bitter, lingering. Another man spits upon the floor, a chieftain from the west, his pride still clinging to him even as chains bruise his skin. Obedience is cowardice, he snarls in Turkic, the translation cracked and hesitant. A man who kneels once will kneel forever. Temüjin says nothing. His eyes, dark and steady, flicker between them like a hawk measuring its prey. The council murmurs, some urging execution, others barter, others silence. The air thickens, the torches hiss. A drop of molten wax slides down a pillar like a slow tear. He takes a step forward. The weight of the moment folds around him. He recalls the law of the steppes, the way his father once spoke of balance, of blood that must answer blood, and yet how mercy, when given, binds more tightly than fear. His fingers touch the dagger at his belt, its edge cool, precise. Power hums there, patient and waiting. He studies the faces before him, the Persian with his cracked lips and shaking shoulders, the Turkic rebel with his hatred like a flame refusing to die. Between them, the space feels like the breath before a storm, fragile, infinite. Temüjin raises his hand. The hall quiets, as though the stones themselves bow to that gesture. He speaks softly, his voice carrying through the arches like a low wind crossing water. The translators lean in, uncertain where to begin, uncertain where to stop. His words are measured, not as commands, but as weights placed upon a scale no one else can see. He names the crimes. He names the mercy. One man will live, not for pardon, but for purpose. Another will die, not for vengeance, but for example. The council listens. Some nod, some flinch, but none interrupt. When the sentence is done, a hush deeper than silence fills the chamber. The captive who will live collapses into sobs. The one condemned straightens his back, the clink of his chains like the toll of a bell. Temüjin does not look away. He watches them both, as though studying the two faces of destiny, fear and defiance, and seeing himself in both. The guards move, steel whispers. A cup is knocked over, silver striking stone, ringing once before rolling to a stop. A drop of spilled milk glides across the floor, glistening in the torchlight like the thin thread of a life severed too soon. The torches sway, shadows dance across Temüjin's face. He steps back, leaning against a pillar slick with cold. The stone presses into his shoulders like the weight of an unseen hand. His eyes travel to the ceiling, to the smoke curling upward, thin, ghostly, vanishing into darkness. In that smoke, he imagines faces, ancestors, enemies, spirits of those left buried beneath snow and steppe. He feels them watching, judging, or perhaps guiding. Behind him, the sound of footsteps fades, guards dragging one man to freedom, another to the pyre. Temüjin's breath slows. The murmurs of the council begin again, the low rumble of politics and fear. But he no longer listens. He is somewhere else, far beyond the fortress walls, beyond the torches, beyond the blood-soaked floor. He is standing again on the steppe, beneath a vast blue sky, the wind rising, the grass bowing in waves like the surface of the sea. He knows that what begins here, this choice, this balance between mercy and terror, will echo far beyond these walls. For the men he spares today will become the tongues that carry his name across deserts and mountains, and those he kills will become the silence that shapes his legend. The council listens. Some nod, some flinch, but none interrupt. When the sentence is done, a hush deeper than silence fills the chamber. The captive who will live collapses into sobs. The one condemned straightens his back, the clink of his chains like the toll of a bell. Temüjin does not look away. He watches them both, as though studying the two faces of destiny, fear and defiance, and seeing himself in both. The guards move. Steel whispers. A cup is knocked over, silver striking stone, ringing once before rolling to a stop. A drop of spilled milk glides across the floor, glistening in the torchlight like the thin thread of a life severed too soon. The torches sway, shadows dance across Temüjin's face. He steps back, leaning against a pillar slick with cold. The stone presses into his shoulders like the weight of an unseen hand. His eyes travel to the ceiling, to the smoke curling upward, thin, ghostly, vanishing into darkness. In that smoke, he imagines faces, ancestors, enemies, spirits of those left buried beneath snow and steppe. He feels them watching, judging, or perhaps guiding. Behind him, the sound of footsteps fades, guards dragging one man to freedom, another to the pyre. Temüjin's breath slows. The murmurs of the council begin again, the low rumble of politics and fear. But he no longer listens. He is somewhere else, far beyond the fortress walls, beyond the torches, beyond the blood-soaked floor. He is standing again on the steppe, beneath a vast blue sky, the wind rising, the grass bowing in waves like the surface of the sea. He turns, cloak brushing against the stone, and steps into the corridor. The air grows colder. From the courtyard, a faint light shimmers, dawn crawling over the horizon. The faint cry of a hawk rings from above the battlements. Temüjin pauses beneath the archway, the world beyond still blurred by mist. He closes his eyes for a breath, feeling the pulse of the earth beneath his boots, the tremor of destiny coiling like a bowstring. When he opens them, the torchlight behind him has dimmed. Ahead lies the long road, alliances to be forged, betrayals to be answered, a world still unclaimed. The dawn wind cuts through the courtyard, carrying with it the scent of blood and morning frost. And as he steps forward into that pale light, the fire inside him stirs once more. Not yet the flame that will burn empires, but its first quiet spark. The air inside the granary tastes of earth and sweat, the scent of toil long buried beneath conquest. Dust motes swirl through the shafts of morning light that pierce the gaps between beams, dancing like spirits unsettled by intrusion. Rats skitter in the shadows, their small claws tapping against wood, a faint echo beneath the distant pulse of war drums. Temüjin moves in silence. Each step is measured, deliberate, his cloak brushing the edges of the grain sacks that tower like quiet sentinels. The fabric beneath his fingers is coarse, burlap woven by hands that once prayed for peace. He pauses, listening. The siege murmurs through the air, the creak of wheels, the shouted orders of men unseen, the slow groan of wooden machines being wound for destruction. The sound travels through the timbers like a heartbeat. War has a rhythm of its own, slow, ancient, inevitable. He breathes in the damp musk of barley and millet. The grain smells alive, 1,000 seeds waiting for spring. Yet he knows what they will feed, not children, but soldiers. Not sowers, but destroyers. Beneath every grain lies a field unplowed, a family gone. He feels it in his chest, that thin boundary between nourishment and hunger, between conquest and ruin. He presses his palm against a wooden beam, rough and splintered. It feels steady beneath his hand, older than him, older than this war. He wonders how many winters it has endured, how many men it has watched come and go. Outside, a shout cuts through the distance, short, sharp, commanding. It fades quickly, swallowed by the wind. He remembers the first siege he ever commanded, years ago. The smell of tar, the glare of fire against night, the cries of men pressed against walls that would not fall. He remembers how his warriors dragged the mangonels forward through mud thick as blood. The ropes slick with rain, the tension of sinew groaning as the stones were flung skyward. He had studied the ways of walls and fortresses. He had captured artisans and engineers, men who once built these defenses, and turned them into the architects of their own undoing.
They taught him of weight and counterweight, of pulleys and levers, of flame that eats through gates faster than steel. In their trembling hands they saw a strange truth, that knowledge, like power, serves whoever dares to wield it.
A flicker of movement catches his eye. From a broken window above, a thin beam of light glides across the silver dust of the floor. He follows it to a corner where chests lie open, their lids crooked like mouths mid-confession. Within them gleam plates of silver, coins stacked in forgotten pride, copper worn dull with the sweat of vanished kings. Temüjin kneels. His hand hesitates over a dish, a piece of fine work, the edge etched with curling vines and script he cannot read. It is cold to the touch, as though it has not yet accepted his claim. He lifts it slowly, letting it catch the light. In the reflection, his face appears, pale, sharp, carved by sleepless years. But behind that reflection, another face stirs. The boy he once was, staring into the river after his father's death. The boy who had nothing, who scavenged roots and bark while others hunted him. The memory burns faintly, like an ember under ash. He hears the lament in the silence, the memory of those who once owned this treasure, their laughter turned to ghosts, their lineage erased by flame. The silver hums faintly in his hand, a sound only he can hear. Then, with a small breath, he places it back, gently, not as plunder, but as a tomb offering. In that gesture lies the strange weight of power, not triumph, but burden. Every victory demands a grave, every conquest carries its mourning. He rises. His armor whispers as he moves, the metal rings brushing like wind through reeds. The storehouse is still again. Only the soft sound of grain shifting in its sacks, a sigh, perhaps, from the earth itself. Temüjin steps toward the doorway. The air outside is brighter, raw. A cold wind slides across his cheek, carrying with it the scent of ash and pine. The sound of siege machines grows clearer now, the rhythmic thud of hammers, the creak of wheels, the deep resonance of a horn calling men to formation. He steps into the light. Beyond the granary walls, the landscape rolls out in a haze of dust and smoke. Wooden towers crawl toward the distant fortress like beasts of burden. Flags ripple, black, red, gold, symbols of clans once at war, now marching under his name. Archers move in lines, their shadows long across the field. The horizon trembles with the heat of motion, the breath of an empire being born through ruin. Temüjin watches it unfold. The drums are steady now, slow, deliberate, the pulse of destiny. He feels it in his bones. He knows that this siege, this turning of the world, is not merely conquest. It is transformation. A rider approaches, dismounts swiftly, bows low. The engines are ready, he says, voice quivering with reverence. Temüjin nods once. No further command is needed. The man runs back to the field, shouting orders into the wind.
Temüjin stands alone for a moment at the threshold, half in shadow, half in light. He looks down at his hands, calloused, scarred, human still. He wonders how long they will remain so before the blood of empire hardens them beyond flesh. The first stone flies, a deep groan, then a thunderous crack. The air quivers with release. Across the distance, the wall shudders under impact. Dust blooms into the sky, rolling like smoke from a sacred fire. Men cheer, voices raw and wild.
Temüjin does not move. His eyes follow the drifting plume as it rises, twisting higher until it becomes indistinguishable from the clouds. He breathes in the dust. It tastes of old cities, of burned banners, of history turning upon itself. And beneath it all, barley, still warm from the earth, waiting to feed the victors and the vanquished alike. The horn sounds again, lower, longer, more distant this time. It carries across the plains, into the hollows of the steppe, where winter already gathers its breath. Temüjin turns from the storehouse, from the coins, from the scent of the harvest. His cloak lifts in the wind as he walks toward the siege lines, toward the gates that will crumble, the fire that will rise, and the silence that will follow. And as he steps into the storm of war, the grain behind him stirs in its sacks, as if remembering what it once was meant for. The night breathes slow and cold. It drapes itself across the camp like black velvet, soft yet suffocating. Lanterns hum behind the stretched hides of yurts, their light breathing in and out with the wind. Shadows of men move like wraiths across felt walls, distorted by flame. Somewhere a horse snorts in its sleep. Somewhere else a child whimpers in a dream. The world seems to hold its breath, poised on the trembling edge between silence and storm. Temüjin walks alone. Snowmelt drips from the ribs of tents, striking the mud with slow, deliberate rhythm. The embers of dying fires hiss softly, tiny worlds collapsing into ash. He passes the yurt of his generals, the air thick with the scent of sweat, wine, and roasted meat. From within come murmurs, the rustle of parchment, the scrape of charcoal on hide. He hears them whispering, their voices fraying under the weight of ambition. Who commands the left wing? Who takes the herds? Who will he favor when the world begins to turn? Temüjin lingers in the dark beyond the lamplight. Their words are a mirror of his past, every voice edged with hunger, every promise heavy with deceit. He knows the tone too well, that quiet fear that men disguise as pride. Once he was at their mercy, an orphan of betrayal, sold and forsaken. Now those same shadows kneel to his name, yet trust remains as thin as smoke. He turns away. The night wind bites at his cheek. He walks among the tethered horses, their breath rising like clouds, their eyes glinting in the dark. The smell of leather and iron clings to the air, mingled with the faint tang of blood on wool. Each step he takes sinks softly into frozen earth. He carries no torch. He needs none. He moves through the dark as if born from it. In his mind the past flickers. He sees again the sky, vast, terrible, burning with prophecy. He remembers standing on a rise as a boy, when lightning split the heavens, and he swore that one day no clan, no lord, no tyrant would ever chain him again. He remembers his father's poisoned body, his mother's hands digging roots from the frozen ground to feed their children. He remembers Borte, her eyes steady in the storm, her voice whispering, "The world is not kind, but neither are you helpless." That whisper lingers still. He stops before his own tent. The flap sways gently in the breeze, revealing nothing. Inside, a wooden flute hangs from the center pole, swaying slightly, its pale surface polished smooth by time. He reaches for it. It was once a child's toy, a gift from his mother, long before blood and iron shaped his name. He touches it to his lips, but does not play. The silence feels truer. The wind moves through it, carrying whispers of forgotten songs. Temüjin closes his eyes. He can almost hear the steppe before all the wars, the call of cranes at dawn, the laughter of brothers still living, the murmur of rivers untainted by blood. For a moment the memory softens him. But memory is a cruel companion. When he opens his eyes, the sound of a drum shatters the stillness. A single beat, deep, distant, deliberate. Then another. Then another. The signal rolls through the valley like thunder. Men stir within their tents, horses rear, nostrils flaring. Temüjin lifts his head. The sound calls not just to his army, it calls to something deeper, buried within his ribs. He steps into motion. The flute falls back against his chest, swinging gently, as though marking the rhythm of fate. He walks through the maze of tents, the ground slick beneath his boots, the air charged with the scent of cold iron and fear. His silhouette moves like a shadow among shadows. The drum grows louder. Each strike feels like the heartbeat of the earth, ancient and vast. In the distance, on the far edge of the horizon, a glow rises, faint, red, trembling. Fire. Perhaps a beacon, perhaps the first blaze of destruction. The night itself seems to pulse with it, as though the gods have kindled the sky to watch. Temüjin slows. He turns once, looking back. The camp lies spread behind him, a constellation of dying lights, men sleeping beneath firs, unaware that when they wake, the world will be different. He sees their shapes through the mist, fragile as reeds before a storm. Some will die tomorrow. Some will carve their names into eternity. He feels the enormity of it, the weight of their trust, their doubt, their belief that he can bind the clans and bend the world. A voice murmurs in his mind, echoing from the years when he was still just Temüjin, son of Yesuge. The steppe devours the weak, but it remembers the strong. The drum beats again, louder now, closer. Its sound fills his chest, a summons that feels older than memory. He breathes deep.
The air is cold, alive with promise. Somewhere far off, a wolf howls, long, mournful, defiant. He tilts his head toward the sound, eyes glinting. And then he walks. Not fast, not in haste, but with the calm certainty of one who has already crossed the threshold of doubt. The horizon burns faintly, a smear of ember and smoke. Each step carries him closer to it, each breath fusing the man and the storm into one. Behind him, the camp settles into uneasy silence. The generals' whispers fade, their quarrels forgotten for the night. The wind moves through the tents, stirring the ashes, carrying the scent of iron into the dark.
Temüjin does not look back again. The night opens before him, vast and endless, its silence broken only by the steady roll of the drum. In that rhythm he hears everything: the echo of vengeance, the pulse of destiny, the heartbeat of an empire still unborn. As he walks into the darkness, the red glow flickers across his face, gilding his breath in light. The wind gathers behind him like a tide, and when the next drumbeat comes, it is no longer a signal, it is a promise. The storm has begun to move. The dawn comes not with song, but with smoke. A pale light bleeds across the torn horizon, filtering through the tatters of banners once proud, now ragged ghosts of loyalty fluttering on shattered poles. The air trembles with the low groan of wind over the ruins, a whisper of what was. Below, the field lies strewn with the remnants of war: splintered wagons, twisted shields, charred beams that still weep faint curls of smoke into the morning cold. Ash clings to every surface like memory. And among it all, the faintest sound: the wet rasp of breath, the scraping of boots against broken stone, the living searching among the dead. Temüjin stands upon a scarred rise, the sky bruised above him. His cloak, stiff with soot, whips in the wind, heavy with the scent of blood and iron. Before him sprawls the aftermath, his victory and its cost. The steppe has fallen silent, but the silence feels wrong, as if the earth itself recoils from what it has witnessed. He watches the field below, men sifting through wreckage, scavengers prying metal from bone, the hollow eyes of survivors who do not yet understand they've survived. Some kneel beside the fallen, whispering names that no longer answer. Others curse the gods beneath their breath, voices breaking into the cold air. From somewhere distant comes the soft, haunting keening of women, an unbroken sound, part mourning, part wind. Temüjin does not move. The victory should feel like triumph, but instead it feels like a door closing, another step away from what he once was. He tastes the air, smoke, salt, sorrow. He remembers the siege, the night when the sky turned to flame, when walls buckled under the weight of fire and stone. He remembers the rumble of runaway horses, the hiss of arrows, the screams that rose and vanished in the blaze. No mercy was given, none asked.
Only the storm, his storm, devoured all. The wind stings his eyes, or perhaps it is the memory. He bends and lifts something half buried in the mud, a fragment of iron, blackened and bent. A siege bolt, twisted by fire. He turns it in his hand, its surface cold and rough against his palm. A weapon meant to breach walls, to tear open what was meant to endure. He raises it once, lets it slip from his grasp. It falls, striking stone with a dull clang. And the sound seems to echo longer than it should. In that hollow ring, something inside him trembles. Not regret, but recognition.
The cries of the living rise again. A woman crawls from the wreckage, her hair caked with ash, her hands trembling as she clutches a small child to her chest. Her eyes are wide, hollowed by terror and hunger, yet still alive. Temüjin watches as she stumbles forward, her steps uncertain, her lips cracked and bleeding. When she sees him, she freezes, a figure of legend before her, wrapped in shadow and smoke. He does not speak. For a moment, the world is only breath and distance. Then he steps down from the rise. The earth crunches beneath his boots. The soldiers nearby pause, uncertain. Temüjin kneels before the woman, slowly, as if approaching something sacred. From his belt he draws a water skin and offers it to her. Her hands shake as she takes it. She hesitates, then drinks. The sound of that water, simple, human, alive, feels louder than the drums of war. When her gaze meets his, the air shifts. There, in those hollow eyes, he sees not weakness, but endurance. The quiet, unyielding thread that binds all who survive the storm. It is a mercy that has nothing to do with pity. A mercy born of understanding that every conqueror carries the ruin of others within his triumph. He holds her gaze and, for an instant, sees the shape of the world he wishes to build. A world where no clan starves, where no child hides from the whip, where the strong do not feed on the broken. The sun rises higher, gilding the steel of fallen blades, turning the smoke to gold. The wind carries the scent of new fire from the east, distant villages already bracing for what comes next. Temüjin stands, the weight of his vision settling upon his shoulders like armor. The woman clutches her child, eyes following him as he turns away. Behind him, the field seems to stretch forever, a tapestry of ruin. But in that ruin, he sees something taking shape. He walks through the remains, his steps slow, deliberate. Soldiers part before him, their faces smeared with soot and awe. They whisper his name as though afraid to disturb it. Temüjin. A name that has begun to outgrow the man. He passes a toppled standard, its emblem blackened beyond recognition. He kneels, drives his own spear into the earth, and ties a scrap of horsehair to it, his banner, crude and defiant, fluttering in the morning wind. He looks out over the plain. The light is harsh now, cutting across the hills, illuminating every scar of battle. Birds circle overhead, scavengers drawn to the promise of flesh. But he does not flinch.
He sees beyond them, to the horizon, to the lands not yet taken, to the countless tribes still fractured, waiting for a voice that can bind them. His fingers tighten around the hilt of his sword. The steel is warm now, alive with the rising sun. This, he murmurs, perhaps to the wind, perhaps to no one, is only the beginning. And somewhere within him the faintest tremor of mercy endures, not as softness, but as clarity. He understands now that power alone cannot hold the steppe. It must be bound by something greater, by order, by law, by the will to unite what has always been divided. The morning burns brighter. Smoke drifts upward in twisting columns, like prayers rising from the ashes. The cries of the wounded fade beneath the hum of wind. The child in the woman's arms begins to cry, a thin, human sound that cuts through the stillness, fragile but alive. Temüjin turns toward the sound, and for the first time that morning he smiles, not from joy, but from resolve. The world, he knows, can be broken again, but it can also be remade. He walks onward through the ruins, his banner snapping behind him in the wind. Each step carries him farther from the man he was, the orphan, the outcast, and closer to the storm that history will name him. The sun blazes now, merciless and new, and its light spills over the field like a promise. In the stillness that follows, the earth seems to whisper, not of endings, but of beginnings. The steppe exhales, and somewhere beyond the smoke, the drums begin again. The sky burns like a wound. Crimson bleeds into violet, the last breath of day surrendering to the storm that waits beyond the horizon. Wind rolls across the plain, carrying the scent of ash and iron, the smell of endings. And beneath that bruised sky, Temüjin stands still. Before him rise the walls of a city too proud for surrender, too silent for mercy. Stone towers pierce the fading light, their battlements veiled in incense smoke drifting from unseen shrines. The gates are sealed. Not even the wind slips through their cracks. He does not speak. He listens. From beyond those gates comes the faint murmur of life, the toll of a distant bell, the clink of armor being fastened by trembling hands, the shuffling of silk slippers on polished floors. A city preparing for judgment. He inhales deeply, the air thick with resin and stone, and feels the weight of civilizations pressing against the stillness. He knows this scent, old incense, old fear. It is the smell of empires before they break. The wind pulls at his cloak. Behind him, the banners of his army sway in unison, black shapes against the bleeding horizon. Tens of thousands wait in silence, their breath misting in the cold air, their hearts tethered to his resolve. No song rises from their ranks, no drum breaks the hush, for tonight is not a night of thunder. It is a night of breath held, of blades resting at their master's sides, of destiny standing at the edge of decision. Temüjin steps closer to the gate. The wood is ancient, carved with faded prayers and crowned with iron thorns. He reaches out, presses his palm against it. It's cold, colder than the wind, colder than death. He imagines the hands that built it, masons sweating under sun and fear, kings watching from balconies, priests blessing each stone. He imagines their laughter, their feasts, their poets who sang of eternal walls. Eternity? He almost smiles. No wall is eternal. He signals with a single motion. A horn sounds, low and drawn, echoing across the valley like the breath of some vast beast. The city does not answer, only silence. Then, faintly, a narrow creak, the gate stirring, unwilling, resentful. A slit appears, no wider than a blade. Through it, a glint of eyes, a sentinel shape framed by shadow. Behind him, the hum of 1,000 soldiers holding their breath. The air itself feels brittle, as though one sound might shatter it. The morning burns brighter.
Temüjin steps forward, alone. The torch in his hand spits and flares, light cutting across his face, leaving half of him in darkness. He stops before the gate's slit and waits. A voice speaks from within, muffled by the iron and fear. Who comes? He does not answer. Instead, he lets the silence speak. The silence of deserts crossed, of oaths kept in blood, of names whispered in terror across half the world. The voice stammers again, this time lower. And then, the groan of surrender. Bolts slide back. Chains fall. The gate opens inch by inch, its hinges screaming like wounded men. Warm air spills out, perfumed, perfidious, carrying with it the breath of palaces and prayer halls. Temüjin steps inside. Torchlight floods the narrow corridor, licking the walls where murals of forgotten kings shimmer beneath soot. His boots strike the stone with slow precision, each echo deeper than the last. Behind him, his retinue follows, silent, watchful, their armor breathing faintly with each step. The corridor widens into a courtyard. There, a single yew stands, old and bent, its petals falling in a slow rain of white. Temüjin stops beneath it. The light filters through the drifting blossoms, settling like ash on his shoulders. He closes his eyes. And in that moment of stillness, he feels the heartbeat of the city. It thrums beneath his feet, a living thing, pulsing with fear and memory. He hears it all, the shuffle of silk in distant halls, the soft prayers whispered into curtained corners, the scraping of a blade drawn beneath a robe. Every sound carries meaning. Every silence, intent. He stands not merely before a city, but before an idea, the promise of power built on ritual, deception, and beauty. His mind drifts to other courts, to jeweled envoys and their honeyed tongues, to palaces where poets recited verses to kings too proud to listen. He remembers sitting across tables of gold where hands wrote treaties in ink and blood, smiling even as daggers were passed beneath. He recalls the languages of empire, Persian, Chinese, Turkic, each one a song of ambition, each one a veil for fear. And he, the man who spoke in deeds instead of words,
learned to answer them with silence and fire. The city feels fragile beneath his gaze, as though one breath from him might unmake it. A cat slinks across the courtyard, vanishing behind a column. From a balcony above, a faint rustle, a watcher, perhaps a trembling noble or a priest praying to gods that have turned their faces away. Temüjin opens his eyes and lifts his head. For a heartbeat, the world holds its breath. He speaks, a single command, quiet but absolute. The word travels through the air like an arrow. His captains bow and disperse into shadow. Boots strike marble, echoing through corridors that have known only the soft tread of courtiers. Doors open, curtains fall. The city exhales. Temüjin walks deeper into its heart, past fountains crusted with soot, past statues with eyes gouged out, past incense that burns not in worship, but in disguise. He passes through a hall lined with mirrors, in each reflection a different face, the orphan, the exile, the warrior, the Khan. He looks once and looks away. He knows which one will survive the night.
Finally, he enters the great hall. Its roof arches like a cathedral. Its walls glimmer with mosaics. Dragons, suns, lions, symbols of power that now bow in silence. At the far end, a throne stands empty, draped in silk that stirs at his approach. He stops before it, the air thick with candle smoke. No ceremony, no crown, no witness, only the echo of his own breath. He places his hand on the cold armrest. In that touch lies everything: conquest, cost, inevitability. He does not sit. He does not need to. For this is not coronation. It is becoming. Outside, the wind shifts. The last embers of dusk vanish, replaced by the first pale glimmer of dawn. The storm that waited beyond the horizon has found its moment. Temüjin steps back into the courtyard, the torchlight gone, the world washed in gray. He stands again beneath the yew tree. Petals drift around him, falling like snow on stone. Somewhere in the distance a bell tolls, slow, uncertain, surrendering. The city has opened its heart, and with it its fate. Temüjin looks toward the rising sun, its light spilling across the high walls, gilding the dust that hangs in the air. He breathes once, deeply. The air no longer smells of incense. It smells of dust, sweat, and possibility. He turns to his men. "Prepare the banners," he says softly. His voice does not echo. It does not need to. And as the first light of day creeps through the gates, Temüjin steps forward, not as conqueror, but as something greater. The man who will turn the ruins of empires into the bones of a new world. The petals keep falling, and the storm finally begins.